didn't bring any cards. That was dumb.
I didn't either. You know what's interesting? I was driving across the board. Years ago, I saw
tough, like physically, emotionally, because I was definitely my outlet. So, but
so what kind of dances do you do?
she does hip hop, she does modern. She's classically trained, but she hates ballet. So it's not her. She does just enough of it to be able to maintain technique. But like this performance today, she's primarily in hip hop. Her dance studio does one big show a year that is their showcase. We have a special youth ensemble. It's a former Alvin Ailey dancer, so it's more of a vocal showcase, not a pageant or competition focused one. It's really nice.
Yeah, the competitions have become. My neighbor dances, and she was at one of those heavy competition studios, and she has a very good memory. So they put her at like 7 on these competition teams because she would lower the average age. Because she was a 7-year-old with good memory. And then the older girls were normal to her. It was an awful situation, and it's like, what's normal?
Right. It's not fun.
Yeah.
It's not joyful.
be sitting next to them.
It's just good to play on my map.
Hi, Lon. How are you?
But it was incredible. It's because you drive, you basically follow the highway, but you get to sit and relax.
That would be a good way to do it.
Yeah. And it's cheap.
Yeah?
It was, I think, $30 a ticket.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, for a 6-hour ride.
Yeah. Okay.
It's worth it. If you're going to do, like, my son Connor is convinced he's going to come to California.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, in 4 or 5 years, that's going to be a trip I have to do again.
Right. Right. That's a good idea. 'Cause we're also like, I have family in Oregon as well. And then Deb is
All
like,
good. We haven't met in person. So many times. Great to meet you in person.
So are you into the level that we're supposed to go? Sorry.
No.
And Stella,
Thank you for having me.
Seattle.
I would love to, but I would.
Oh my God, this is.
Mike and I are going to go. I'm like, oh, good. Yeah. We just found out this week.
Oh, this is great.
I love that I can offer something.
And you do. It's great what you bring. So thank you very much.
If we could start taking our seats,
Yeah, so I spoke to somebody. I just made
we're going to get started in just a couple of minutes.
talking about doing a maybe. Yes, so I need to update that MOU for you. I will have to by Monday morning.
I have to turn that back around by Tuesday.
We're going to get started in about 5 minutes. If find seats, please.
Fingers
I'm sorry?
fingers crossed.
No, and I know it takes time. I'm waiting on NSF or something. They were supposed to tell me in February. So, yeah.
I don't want to interrupt.
You're fine.
We chat a lot.
It's true.
Miss Carrie, can we get a quick picture in front of that slide?
Absolutely. Oh, fall back into that chair and never get out again.
Yeah, mine's kind of sinking a little bit more than I thought. So we haven't met. What is your connection with the school?
So my connection is that I work for the State Department of Education.
Okay.
So I oversee the Science Education process.
Fantastic. That's good
School
for you.
conservation is one of the
sites?
based organizations that's going to be a part of one of our grant opportunities. So,
Good.
And on a separate and personal note, my mom grew up in Branchville, so my family is
Really?
local, and I went to camp at what is now the YMCA camp, but was an Episcopal
Oh, okay.
camp when I was a kid.
Oh, very cool. It's right down the road.
Over at Jessup, yeah.
Is that the one just when you come off 206?
Yeah.
The one right there? Right there?
Although at the time we were on the other side of the river, which is now defunct. If you not the other side of the road. So there's the campsite is on this side now. There's a little bit over to
Okay. Yes.
another small.
Right.
That was the campsite.
Okay. All right.
I keep thinking I need to just go down that road and see what it looks like now. But every time I think about doing it, I'm by myself.
You're somewhere else. Yeah.
But I'm also just like, it's probably not wise for me to go by myself.
It's pretty remote. Yes.
Yeah. So lady who might be our relative.
Hi.
We might be cousins.
Really?
My mom's name is Kirk, and her father's from Massachusetts.
Oh my gosh.
From like Walden, Somerville. Yeah.
We might be cousins.
Yeah.
So, we should. Are you on 23 and Me over here?
We are, and ancestors.
I'm on 23 and Me, so we should exchange
That's my
information.
sister asked me, and I told her about all this.
Holy moly. That is wild.
It might be like really far back. This mic is so sensitive, like every time somebody gets it down. And none of it really so I feel like it might be like...
Yeah, because I've met folks that are from, I'm living in Philadelphia now, so that area said, man, we're from Boston. Wow, you're the first one.
I'm like, yeah, they're all from the Boston area. She was like, we are. And I was like...
Yeah, Medford Malden is,
Yeah.
wow. Couldn't have been many, so awesome. Yeah. Holy moly. That's wild. Oh my God, Morty, yeah. Yep. 60, 71. Yep, I remember you. How are you? Good to see you. So, haven't seen you in, what, 50 years or something? 45 years? Yeah, that's right. The head table. Under the watchful eye.
I tell you, I'm kind of bummed out that I don't have the results.
I'll see what I can do for the next one. Yeah. Look like Jack. Thank you. No. Great seeing you, Marty. Wow, this is memory lane for me. Oh, great, thank you. Haven't seen that guy in easily 50 years. Holy moly. So that means when I last saw him, I was one.
Of course.
Yeah. Just realized, wow, that's dating myself.
It's okay. I recently find myself having those conversations as well. We've been friends for how many years?
Yeah,
Never
like,
mind.
yeah, long time.
If we could have all of our panelists up front, please.
Good morning. How's it going?
Hi, how are you? Hi, Walker. John, nice to meet you.
I appreciate it.
Good.
I know you're going, so I'm happy to see.
I saw you walk in.
Okay, we're going to get started. If people could take seats. If all the folks outside could come in.
Green, smart.
Well, you know, that's the membership thing. Yeah, that's all right.
We're going to get started.
Correct. Well, we are sending a little tribal prayer to all of us.
Why don't I introduce you and then I'll come back to you because I'm going to thank you.
So I am president of the New Jersey.
Yeah, but
So over supporters and
okay, folks. Hello. Good morning. How are you? Isn't it wonderful to reconnect with people you haven't seen in a long time, or maybe you just saw yesterday? Happy 75th, New Jersey School of Conservation and our friends. So I have some things to say, but I'm going to first let our president, the wonderful Jennifer Coffey, give you a greeting and say hello.
Thank you, Carrie. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see so many familiar faces, so many new faces. As Carrie said, my name is Jennifer Coffey, and I have the phenomenal pleasure of serving as the president of the board of the Friends of the School of Conservation. And so I want to thank everyone for being here today. Carrie's going to do the official thank yous, but just a few words. When we transitioned leadership was that just last year? There's a lot of work that's been done here in the past year. When we transitioned leadership, I just wanted to share something for those of you who weren't here. This place is obviously phenomenal, obviously magical, and it is incredibly heartfelt and definitely a family business. So we've got Carrie's brother up here on our panel. When we transitioned, they wanted to physically hand over the torch. And so I'm looking to infuse the torch with some good energy. So I'm hoping we can give a good whoop whoop for our 75th. So this handmade torch is made from a broomstick that's done a lot of work here at the School of Conservation. And the different buttons that were gathered here represent the diversity of people that we draw to this place. And there's a little button in the front that's got kids and a big heart because we heart kids here. And I see this little guy as an explorer, as an astronaut, because we are doing new things and exploring new ways to protect our environment and educate kids here. So I'm just going to put this up here for now, so we can get all kinds of good love and energy in there, but we have that at our board meetings, just so you know, to remind us of what's important and why we're here. I also just wanted to share because I'm fairly new to the School of Conservation, and all of you, there's so much history and so much love and so much passion here. I wanted to share something my dearly departed dad had shared with me when I graduated. He said, getting emotional talking about my daddy. He told me about education. I think he cribbed this off of B.B. King, is what I found out. Dad was infinitely cool. He said, with education, nobody can take it away from you. He didn't graduate from high school. I'm the first in my family to graduate from college. And here, that resonates in a different way, because nobody can take this experience of the School of Conservation away from us. Look at all of the people that are here that have been touched by and that have touched the school. You're here again today, and we're here so that we do this for this generation and the next generation and the next 75 years. So we are thrilled and honored to have you with us here today, and we are thrilled and honored to have your passion, your intellect, your support, your action moving forward so that we can continue to build this school to be there to fight the big challenges that we have that we're going to hear about today for climate change, and that we are going to build a better community, a more just and equitable and sustainable New Jersey because of you and because of amazing, magical places like this. So with that, I kick it off for today. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here, and I turn it over to our indomitable executive director and former board president, so talk about big shoes to try to fill, Ms. Carrie Kirkflew.
I think Jen and I have something that we share, many things we share in common, but certainly it's a love for our dad. So I appreciate the emotion, Jen. Okay, I don't want to spend a lot of time on thanking all of our sponsors because we're going to do that at lunch, but I do want to acknowledge our two sponsors for the climate change panel today, the Association of New Jersey Environmental Commissions and the New Jersey League of Conservation Voters. So thank you very much for sponsoring this great panel. And thank all of you for coming today. I'm hoping that we're going to learn some things and get engaged in the conversation. We're going to make it as interactive as possible, but now I'm going to do the boring stuff that really is necessary to tee it up. And as a sort of a SOC history buff, I wanted to share what I've learned over the last couple of years as we explored our archives and learned more about the phenomenal things happening here at the School of Conservation and how education in the broader community was implemented here in very innovative and unique ways. So bear with me as I take you on this journey of environmental education to climate change education. According to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, environmental education is defined as a process that allows individuals to explore environmental issues, engage in problem solving, and take action to improve the environment. It helps individuals develop a deeper understanding of environmental issues and have skills to make informed and responsible decisions. However, the elements of environmental education were present in environmental curricula long before U.S. EPA even existed. But the term, some of you may not realize, and the actual field of EE was conceived in the early mid-1960s. It took place in a graduate seminar on the University of Michigan campus with a group of graduate students led by Dr. William B. Stapp, the father of environmental education. They were discussing the environmental crises of the time facing our country and the world. They were concerned that school curriculum was not adequately addressing the topic of pollution, habitat destruction, sustainability, and public health consequences. They believed that in addition to the concepts taught in the nature study and conservation movement, along with the school camping and outdoor education movement, that these larger societal and ecological interdisciplinary topics needed to be incorporated into school curriculum. During the course of their discussions, they coined the term environmental education and described it as thus. Environmental education is aimed at providing a citizenry that is knowledgeable concerning the biophysical environment and its associated problems, aware of how to help solve these problems, and motivated to work toward solutions. This definition and description of environmental education first appeared in print in the first edition of the Journal of Environmental Education in 1969, authored by William B. Stapp. But let's go back further, because actually the term or the concept of environmental ed that I mentioned was used in nature study and school camping movements. And we reflect those movements in our curriculum today. As early as the 18th century, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, a Genevan philosopher, writer, and composer, stressed the importance of education that focuses on the environment in his publication called Emile, or On Education. Several decades later, Louis Azagi, a Swedish-born naturalist, echoed Rousseau's philosophy as he encouraged students to study nature, not books. The nature study movement in the United States was a popular educational reform movement that began in New York in the 1890s and peaked between 1890 and 1920. It was the first major American educational reform movement to combine educational reform theory with the study of the environment. The movement's goal was to reconcile scientific investigation with personal experiences gained from interacting with nature and to instill a lifelong love for the natural world. It emphasized learning from tangible objects, and its mantra was, study nature, not books. Related to this nature study movement was conservation education. Conservation education is the study of people's wise use of our natural environment through the development, management, preservation, and renewal of natural resources for material, cultural, and aesthetic needs to benefit and present and future generations. In the 1930s, the nature study conservation movement was influenced by the educator Dr. William Gould Vinyl, who actually was one of our pioneers here at the School of Conservation. He suggested that natural areas can be used as extensions of classrooms and emphasize a greater awareness of the interrelationship between living and non-living things and their dependence on each other. In the 1950s, the concepts of natural resource management were integrated into school curriculum. Two other separate but related educational movements influenced school curriculum: school camping and outdoor education. Popular in the 1940s, Dr. Vinyl, who became known as the father of nature recreation, significantly contributed to this movement. His work with the Boy Scouts and the National Recreation Association served as the impetus for public schools to begin school camping experiences in the summer months. A second major figure in school camping and outdoor education was Dr. Julian Smith, also someone who worked here at the School of Conservation. Dr. Smith stressed education in the out-of-doors and for the out-of-doors. He emphasized skills like archery, riflery, fly casting, fly tying, fishing, boating, and canoeing. These activities were integrated into the various subjects of school curriculum with a strong emphasis placed on social interaction and group living. A third key figure in this area and one of our founders was Dr. L.B. Sharp, the famous educator known for National Life Camps, who one of which still exists today down the road from here, Trailblazers Camp, and we have a working relationship with them. Dr. Sharp placed great emphasis on pioneer living skills such as fire building, outdoor cooking, and the establishment of small group units to enhance the learning experience. Pre-service training for teachers to become proficient in field study emerged in 1949, and the School of Conservation was one of 2 educational field centers in the country to offer such training. The emphasis for this programming was to help students to assimilate more cognitive material through direct experience, which was thought to extend retention of subject matters. In the 1950s, school camping, outdoor education movement emphasized learning in an outdoor classroom. And finally, in the 1960s, more attention to the development of attitudes relating to proper use in natural areas. Over the course of the SOC's history, all 6 directors embraced these various educational perspectives and integrated them into the curriculum and programs during their time of service, and offered subsequent programs to students and teachers who attended our school programs, summer camps, teacher training, workshops, and college and graduate school courses and programs. Dr. Partridge, D'Altern Partridge, in 1949, our first director, designed and implemented field courses to enrich school curriculum and provide future teachers with the necessary skills and ability to work comfortably with children in the natural environment. In 1951, Dr. Edward Ambry, the second director of the school, helped to expand the reach of this philosophical perspective by entering into a cooperative agreement between the 6 state colleges then in existence to provide training and conservation education at the SOC to all students enrolled to become educators. Luther Lindemuth, our third director, took over the reign in 1957 while also serving as the superintendent of Stoke State Forest, as well as the principal forester for the state of New Jersey, a title he held until 1962. Lindy continued the tradition of field study by offering trailside instruction to thousands of teachers and students during his tenure at the School of Conservation. He also held the position during a time when the director role transitioned from part-time to full-time. As the decade drew to a close, Mr. Clifford Emanuelson, the fourth director, made a gradual transition in philosophy of the school by focusing on curriculum enrichment through conservation field study and developing programs that would establish a sensitivity and awareness of the importance of natural resource management in students. Under the direction of the fifth director, Dr. John J. Kirk, in 1963, the environmental crisis and public awakening of man's role in and responsibility for respect and appreciation and protection of the planet inspired him to place a greater emphasis on the development of a reverence for life through an ecological investigation of the interdependence of living things with the goal of forming a land ethic demonstrating man's temporary stewardship of the land. Quote, that's Dad's quote. It was during his tenure that EE came into existence and spread across the planet. John Kirk actually explained this new educational approach in a presentation in 1977 at the National Association for Environmental Education conference in Estes Park, Colorado. He explained it in this way. He suggested that 2 educational movements at the time, the Nature Study Conservation movement and the school camping outdoor education movement, along with the societal outrage and outcry over the serious environmental crises we were facing in our nation and world, collided in such a way that it caused a philosophical quantum leap in the educational field that created environmental education. Our educational approach then at the School of Conservation shifted away from conservation education and natural resources to the broader interconnected concepts of EE. Over the next decade or so, many international conferences and workshops were held around the world and in the United States as understanding of the impacts of pollution, particularly ozone, changing weather patterns, and sea level rise became more evident. Mention of climate change education took the form of topics such as study on atmospheric conditions, changing weather patterns, greenhouse gas effects, global warming, and sustainable development. In June of 1992, the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, also known as the Earth Summit, was held in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. This global conference brought together political leaders, diplomats, scientists, representatives of the media, and non-governmental organizations from 179 countries for a massive effort to focus on the impact of human socioeconomic activities on the environment. There were a lot of outcomes from the Earth Summit, but one of them dealt directly with the need for climate education. In Article 6, it states that education that needs to deal with education and public awareness programs on climate change and its effects. It was during this period in the world that Dr. Bill Thomas, assumed the directorship and became the 6th director of the center. During his tenure here at the school, it expanded to incorporate concepts and emphasis on sustainability and biodiversity. The school received a grant to construct a solar field, which you probably have parked near, some of you, that would power half of our campus, and an agreement was reached with Rutgers University to put a weather station, which is part of the statewide climate change network. We're very proud to have that on our campus. This period also saw a focus on facilitated discovery and learning through research and conservation, And the School of Conservation also saw a resurgence in teacher training and professional development in subjects such as biodiversity, sustainability, herpetology, and forensic entomology. Meanwhile, globally, the subject of climate change education continued to develop. Established in 2010, UNESCO Climate Change Education for Sustainable Development program aimed to help people understand climate change by expanding climate change education activities in non-formal education through media networking and partnerships. Here in the United States, following the release of the Next Generation Science Standards in 2013, over 20 states and the District of Columbia adopted them. The Next Generation Science Standards encourages climate literacy in order to better educate students of Earth's current climate crisis with updated scientific information around climate change. And here in New Jersey, thanks to the leadership of First Lady Tammy Murphy in 2020, the New Jersey State Board of Education adopted new learning standards which integrate climate change education across all content standards. The standards came into effect with the 2022-23 school year, making New Jersey the first state in the nation to do so. I'm very pleased to report that all the classes taught here at the School of Conservation have been correlated not only with the state core curriculum standards, but with all of the new climate change standards as well. And this brings us to the reason we're here today, our distinguished panel. And so we are going to, let's see, where's my notes here? Start with, who did we say we're going to start with? I think we're going to start with Miss Sarah. So the way that this is going to work is each of our panelists are going to speak briefly on the topic of climate change as it relates to the organization to which they belong. And then we will open it up for questions. So our first speaker is Sarah Sterling Lalde. She's the Senior Advisor on Climate Change Education for the New Jersey Department of Education. In her role, she oversees DOE's Climate Change Education Unit, which supports the administration of $4.5 million in annual grants to schools, to green and blue career and workforce development. We're very pleased to have Sarah here today to hear her story and how DOE is helping to shape education and curriculum in New Jersey. Sarah?
Thanks so much. I will give you just the briefest personal history to get us into talking a little bit more about the standards. So my family, my mom's family, is from Branchville, New Jersey. My mom moved to Paterson, New Jersey as a newlywed. She and my father, my dad was a minister, and they moved to Paterson to take on a church in 1969 and never left. And so I was raised in Paterson, but was in Branchville for family holidays. My grandparents eventually moved away because it got too built up and there was too much traffic, according to my grandfather, in about 1986. But I went to camp at what is now the YMCA camp down the road when it was the Episcopal Eagles Nest camp every year from the time that I was 8 until I was 18. I worked there briefly as well when I was 17 and 18. So I have a deep love of this region, and while the School of Conservation wasn't a part of my life, either as a teacher or as a child, this whole area is incredibly important to me, and my mom participated in programming here as a child. So very excited to be a part of this, and to be coming at it from a different perspective because I moved away, right? And I am a city girl through and through. I was born and raised in Paterson. I taught in the Paterson Public Schools. I taught middle school science for 15 years, then became a supervisor of science in both Paterson and New Brunswick, and then eventually moved into this role. So as a science teacher and as a supervisor in an urban area, by accident, I stumbled on how powerful the outdoors was for my students. I noticed in the very first couple of encounters that I had with my students outside that kids who couldn't function very well in the classroom suddenly came alive in the outdoor space and were able to participate in learning and demonstrate mastery of things that was really challenging for them in a formal classroom setting that just wasn't built for the kind of learner that they were. So I was fully on board and empowered by my experience with outdoor education, and sustainability education, and how it helped students both find agency for themselves, but then also really think about how they could impact environmental challenges close to home. So that led me to this role. And so why standards? Why do we have standards? Well, the move to initiate the climate change education standards was really about trying to ensure that we would have universal access to learning about these topics for all kids. We know that children who grow up in environments like this have it at their doorstep all day long, and there is learning that happens for those of us who are fortunate enough to live in these environments or spend lots of time in them that city kids don't get to have. And unfortunately, for many of our city kids, they are really limited in scope in terms of what they do get to learn about. There is such a focus on the reading and the writing and the math, particularly as we think about these learning gaps that we're hearing about having come as a result of COVID, but also just as a result of poverty, that mean that kids don't always get the opportunity to engage in the ways that we would like, not just in outdoor learning, but even in science learning and in civics learning, right? So by creating the standards, the goal is for there to be more universal access. And that means that we create a citizenry that is better prepared to respond to the kinds of challenges that we have coming at us. We're facing some of them already today, and we will see more of them as we move forward. So we made a decision to focus on standards because we are a local control state. Every single community that you live in has the responsibility and the right to develop local curricula. We don't get to tell you that from the state office. But what we can tell you is, here's the learning goal. This is where we want you to get. How you get there is your choice. Unfortunately, often, we do this through unfunded mandates, right? We say, do it! And then we don't provide support or funding to ensure that we actually can implement with any kind of fidelity. Our governor and first lady, largely through conversation with the governor of not the University of Washington, but of Washington, forgive me, came to the conclusion that they really needed to put their money, or put our money, where our mouth is in terms of supporting the implementation of the climate change standards. And so in fiscal year 23, there was this first round of grants available to schools to help with implementation. It's important to note that that first rounds of implementation was in the 7 content areas that were not math and language arts, right? It was everything else but math and language arts. But again, leading up to that implementation, leading up to 2023, there had not been funding to support teachers being trained either to really understand what climate change was or how to take something like an idea around climate change and express it in an arts class, for example. And so the grants are really meant to focus on providing those opportunities for teacher learning and then by extension student learning to make that happen. Fiscal year 23, we didn't do such a good job. We decided that the best way to do that was to divide the money evenly across all districts. It was like the Oprah moment, right? And you get some, and you get some, and you get some. But it was a really tiny amount of money, and it meant that it wasn't very effective. And it was also done on such a short time frame that we weren't able to ensure that people were going to be able to do anything meaningful. So in fiscal year 24, where we are right now, is that we've done something very different. We have 2 different grants that are currently enacted. The first is just getting started, and there'll be an announcement this week about it, which created climate change learning collaboratives at 4 universities across the state. And we have representatives from one of them in the audience from Ramapo. And so what the climate change learning collaboratives will do is that they'll have our university partners who are partnered with community-based organizations like the School of Conservation. The School of Conservation is one of the partners for Ramapo. Will provide professional development, experiential learning opportunities for students and teachers, support in district for teachers to be able to think about how they can engage with the local issues that they're dealing with, and whatever else they can beg, borrow, and steal from the Learning Collaborative to do. The second will go to the school districts themselves, to a small group of school districts, to create model programs. And then those model programs will be able to showcase to other districts and help them implement as we move forward. I think that's probably all I have time to say, but I do want to say one more thing, which is, school districts are holistic systems. They take up a lot of real estate in our communities. We need to think about them as holistic systems, I should say. They take up a lot of real estate in our communities. A lot of our dollars go to supporting them. And so if we can think about how all of the parts of school districts, our facilities and infrastructure, what we do operationally, and what we do educationally for students and staff, if we think about how we adjust all of those things to be more sustainable, to be more responsive to changes in our environment, that has positive impacts for the entire community. So I just sort of put that out there as my final thought for you all as we think about how we advocate to support what's going to be happening in communities like this and communities all across the state. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. That was great. Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Sean Spiller. He is a high school science teacher in Wayne Public Schools. He's also the president of the New Jersey Education Association. Was elected to NJEA president in 2021. And prior to that, he was the secretary-treasurer of the NJEA. I actually first met Sean long before we got involved with the School of Conservation, when I was the liaison to the DEP, and I was traveling around the state meeting all of the mayors in the state of New Jersey, and we had a lovely visit for the first time in Montclair in his office, and I'm so delighted that we now have the opportunity to have him be a board member and here today with us to speak about NJEA and what they're doing for climate change education.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'll just start out by saying, as I listened to the history before, and you listen to that rich history and the work that's gone in for 75 years, it's first and foremost, it's impressive and important. And as I listen to it, though, I only think that as important as the work was then, I think everyone would argue, right, it is equally, if not more important now. Right, I think we see where we're at and where we are in terms of our interaction in the environment, and where we still have to go, what we still have to do. And we understand that spaces like this, where educators, I say that as an educator, high school science teacher, anatomy and physiology, biology, but I say that as a teacher who understands the importance of being able to experience different things that you can bring to your students and help them learn and grow. Students themselves who can experience things. Those fundamental learnings and understandings and interactions in a space can stay with you for life. And I think that the work that we see happening here is important because as we know as educators, knowledge is power. And as we have students who are going to be leading that next generation of work in terms of how we all interact with the environment, it is paramount that understanding and that learning translates at some point here, fundamentally, into policy changes, right? I mean, that is the goal, that is the hope, that these type of learned experiences then eventually lead to a citizenry that says we prioritize this decision over that because we understand the impact on our interaction in the environment. And I think that's a big piece of the work that goes on here, right? Explicitly or not. I say this, I also think that we are seeing this as in a greater importance in terms of education. I say that as a parent of a student in Montclair schools, right? My older one, who is here today, attends a school where the focus is on environmental education, right? That alone, as a magnet school, saying this is your whole focus is an important example of, I think, where we are and where we're moving. But we know that not every student is going to, as was said before, learn or understand or really grow best in those four walls of a traditional classroom. Oftentimes, it is the ability to come to like the place like the School of Conservation and get a different experience that really gets you hooked on something, right? That gets you excited about something, and I think that's an important piece that we see here as well in the work that happens. I think organizationally, though, I want to focus on a few things. Of course, as an organization, more broadly, we have 200,000 members that we represent, educators throughout this state. We are laser focused when we talk about conversations with the administration or others around funding and resources. Right? You always tell people, don't tell me about your priorities. Show me your budget. Right? And it is always making sure we are advocating for the dollars that are needed for our students and our educators to continue to be leaders in this space. That's of course important. But we also know that our partnerships themselves are very important. One of the things I will say, as one of the earlier supporters of this was when Sustainable Jersey for Schools started, right? We had Sustainable Jersey as a mayor, as was noted, familiar with it on the municipal side. But as it really grew into the school side of things, what a great opportunity. And we as an organization at NJEA said we want to be one of the prime supporters and funders of that, right? So that there are dollars and grants for schools and students, educators, communities to learn about the environment, interaction in the environment, and of course, go and grow from there. I think that's been immensely successful. It has been a program where it is not only do you see so many districts that are now participating, but also we see the impact of just the conversation that's occurring around it, and the programs that are coming from that. Right, it is individual projects for sure, but it's also changes in terms of what is being taught in schools on a more granular level. So that's important. From a policy perspective, we do, make sure we are lobbying, and we're big supporters of climate education. And when we talk about standards and making sure that different pieces are taught, we are front and center to make sure, quite frankly, sometimes taking some criticisms to make sure that our students are learning a full and true and robust curriculum and education, that they are well prepared to be out there and to be knowledgeable citizens as they want to move and pursue anything that they do in the future. So we've been in that space as well, certainly. But another thing that I want to highlight and probably say, not some kind of more distant piece, but another group that work with Healthy Schools Now has a really big focus on the fact that these environmental changes and things that people are experiencing aren't just like happening out there; they're happening to our schools. They're happening in our schools. I remember very vividly when we had never had it before, but the storms that we've been recently experiencing over the last number of years flooded all of our schools in Montclair. Right, all of our schools get flooded. Nobody can go. We divert all our fire trucks and fire crews to try and pump out our schools and get them going again. But those were weeks without school happening for our kids. Right, when we see that certainly COVID was an example of our schools not being ready with the HVAC systems and otherwise, but also the ability to pivot and change to different hours and days of instruction when you don't have air conditioning and days are hotter and things are harder. These are all like real life impacts that are happening each and every day in our schools and can impact student learning. So it is not just we're doing this and students are learning about this so they can bring it out somewhere and put it to practice. In the very buildings in which they report each and every day, they are experiencing the impact of climate change and what that means on them and for them. So I think in all these spaces, whether it's policy, supporting that, whether it's funding, and certainly it's whether it's helping to grow that understanding, support other spaces, alternative spaces such as this, all of the things have to come together so that our students, again, are grounded in understanding and the importance of environmental education. And then, again, I'll end where I started, just an ability to hopefully be the future leaders that are in positions where decisions are made, where they can decide on policies that are going to mirror what we are hopefully teaching them about now. So that's the goal.
Thank you, Sean. Our next speaker is Dr. Lauren Madden. She's a professor of elementary science education at the College of New Jersey. And just a note, the College of New Jersey, once Trenton State, was actually one of the colleges, one of the 6 colleges who sent their students here for a week-long experience so that they could bring that to their students when they graduated. Dr. Madden holds a bachelor's degree in earth science and oceanography, an MS in marine science, and a PhD in science education. She works and advocates for science literacy and the health of our planet through teaching and learning. And we are very, very pleased to have her here today to talk about what the academic community is doing with respect to climate change education.
Should I use my teacher voice? All right. Can you guys hear me? Yes. Okay. So thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed listening to my colleagues' comments, and I want to just take a step back and say every single thing that's wrong with the world, disease, poverty, climate change, war, is caused by adults, right? Adults are responsible for that. And the decision in New Jersey to implement climate change standards as young as kindergarten meant that we decided to take children seriously. The people who have not ruined the world yet, we've decided that they deserve a seat at the table and that they deserve to learn early on these important foundational pieces of information that are going to help them become decision makers in the future. And I think for me, like that's the big picture here. We've decided to take kids seriously in New Jersey in a way that no other state has, or no other place in the world except Italy has. Italy's the only other place on earth that mandates from young kids that they learn about climate change. Second place on earth. Isn't that incredible? Honestly, think about that. So with all that said, my job is to teach teachers, right? That's what I do day in and day out, is I work with future, mostly elementary school teachers and current teachers through professional learning opportunities and through some research. So we have some generous funds through the state in partnership with Sustainable Jersey, where we've been working on creating some modules to make sure that every teacher in New Jersey who graduates walks into their school ready to attack, ready to teach these standards in a way that is meaningful and developmentally appropriate, that's going to help meet the needs of children. And when we think about what teachers' job is, it's to get the kids in their classroom ready for the future. Are we creating the types of electricians who know how to repair wind turbines and solar panels? Are we creating the kinds of storytellers and lawmakers and art makers who are going to be able to tell the world what we're doing and how we solve these problems? So it really comes down to, are the teachers ready to have these tough conversations with kids? So here we are in the School of Conservation, where we're in this amazingly beautiful place. And I'm going to work really hard to make sure TCNJ gets our kids back here, our students back here soon. But when you spend time in a place like this, it makes the way you look at your own backyard or even look out your own window a little bit different. And it gives kids the tools to be able to look closely and to understand deeply. And to totally misquote Richard Louv, you can't protect what you don't love and you can't love what you don't know. And sometimes you need to be in a really special, pristine place like this to learn how to know. And to take things in from outside. So that's a key part of climate change education, because we're not going to want to protect this planet, this beautiful part, or some of the parts that are less beautiful, right? Or less apparently beautiful, if we don't know how to truly observe them and learn from them and take them in. So I have had the great fortune this last year to work on a statewide study where we visited about 50 classrooms across the state. The goal was to go to 3 classes in every county, 1 elementary, 1 middle, 1 high school, across subjects, at teachers' invitation, to see how they were teaching about climate change. And we are getting ready to start the data analysis, which is going to be a lot, because there's hours and hours of observation notes and interviews. And I've been blown away. I have been absolutely floored by what we've seen. I expected to see mostly science teachers, and we did get mostly science teachers, but I was in Spanish classes and art classes and PE classes and reading classes, and saw these teachers really take ownership of the importance of their discipline in solving this climate crisis. That's been remarkable. That's been something really special, and I think we have a lot to say about that. Now, of course, the teachers who volunteer for some professor they don't know to come to their classroom are the ones who probably feel confident teaching about it to begin with. But that said, we know it's possible, and we know it's possible everywhere in the state. And I should be really clear, not all of the schools that we saw were the ones where you might expect us to go to see, where we have beautiful outdoor spaces nearby or a lot of funding. We spent time in Newark and Trenton and Camden and saw teachers doing spectacular things. I feel really confident about that. I feel really good about that. As a parent of twin fifth graders in public schools in New Jersey, I experienced our first rain closure this year, and my kids did too. We had some schools, some districts were closed for weeks on end because of the rain. Have you ever heard of a rain day? This is what's happening right now. And I think if we really want to take kids seriously, we have to know the way climate change is impacting their bodies is truly impacting their health and development. When I think back to my childhood and snow days and playing outside and baking bread and spending time with my brother and watching cartoons, my kids might think about that for rain days. We have a big changing world right now, but I believe we are in the very most hopeful place to think about how we can change the path of the trajectory of those changes. So I'm very excited to be here, and I'm very excited that you're all here.
Thank you, Dr. Madden. Well, I'm especially excited to introduce our next speaker, Ms. Tanya Solikowski. She has been here almost as long as I have, which is pretty amazing. She first arrived in the 6th grade at a field trip to the School of Conservation, and it inspired her career as a field ecologist and classroom teacher. She returned to the school 3 more times, right? There were 3 more times. First as a student teacher in 1999, next as a graduate school student conducting macroinvertebrate research in the Flat Brook, and she's still doing it now. She's always messing around in that brook there. And finally as faculty in 2018 until the school briefly closed. I don't like to say we closed, we paused, because we did actually stay open and worked on public programming, so we weren't really closed, just paused. And Tanya became very good friends with the Friends and helped us develop programs. And so when we got the funding to reopen, she was the obvious choice to be our education director. She is a rock star. I don't know anyone who knows EE the way this woman does. And I feel very, very honored to introduce my great Director of Education, Tanya, to talk about what we're doing in education here at the School of Conservation.
Thanks, Marcia. Thank you for that, and I am so excited to be here, and I feel I'm a little biased because of my long history here at the SOC, but I know what we are capable of doing, and I'm listening to all of our panelists talk about the changes that are afoot in New Jersey, and I can't think of a better place for us to be in our organizational development and for us to be positioned in a way to help support teachers and students and research that's happening across the state. So I just want to give you a really brief overview of what we're doing at the School of Conservation because I'm really excited about it. When I talk about our programming and our resources here at the SOC, I think about it as sort of 3 legs of a stool: research, teacher professional development, and the student field experience. And those 3 things are intertwined very deeply here at the SOC. And that's one of the things that makes what we do here so unique. And I think, Carrie talked about the evolution of environmental education and experiential education, and we live that here every day. And we all know the power of those kinds of foundational experiences that we can provide for students and how we can set them on the course to, be future explorers and think about how they're going to help solve the world's problems. So in the research arena here, I'm very proud to share that we're now the Northern New Jersey field station for Rutgers University. So that opens up a lot of opportunities. Frank Gallagher, who is our Director of Research, isn't here today, but he's been an integral part of us establishing a wonderful relationship with Rutgers and thinking about what our future research relationships will look like with other academic institutions across the state. Frank is doing his own research here on campus related to climate change education and climate change research, and he's looking at, if you find Frank later, you can ask him about all the details of his research. It's a pretty interesting and complex topic, but he's looking at the role of secondary forests in carbon sequestration and climate change mitigation. And because Frank was a former environmental educator, he understands how important it is to connect research to education. And so he's been helping us develop some new lessons related to dendrochronology. That's a mouthful, but we're using that as a basis for some new lessons that we're doing in the high school and teacher professional development areas. We're also cooperating with Penn State University on an exciting research project called SparkNet, and the idea is to get our students and our teachers that are visiting here out onto campus. We have these salamander cover boards, little 12 by 12 pieces of pine that are out in the forest. The students can go out and flip those over and count salamanders. Like, what's more fun than that? But then we are contributing to a larger data set, and we're looking at how salamander abundance and distribution changes over time as our climate's changing. So as the School of Conservation is rebuilding the research program, the goal is really to create opportunities for the students and the teachers that are here on campus to get experience in how data collection happens and what that looks like and how that's connected to larger issues. So we are hoping to continue to build that program. We're really excited about it. Teacher professional development is the second leg of our stool, and Carrie talked a little bit about that in her introductory remarks and how important that has been as part of our school's history. And now I think it's more important than ever. What I see as a former classroom teacher who was fortunate enough to have a strong background in science, I see a lot of teachers that haven't had that exposure to field science, and there's all this data out there now that teachers have access to when they teach climate change, but they don't really have the foundational experience to understand where that data comes from. So my goal is to create teacher training opportunities here that get teachers out in the field, get tools in their hands, and help them understand where that data is coming from so that they can bring that information to life for their students. We've been offering some workshops related to that, and as Sarah mentioned, we are so excited to be part of the new Climate Change Learning Collaborative with Ramapo. This was a big, exciting piece of news for us just in the last month or so. And so we are going to be working with the 7 northern New Jersey counties that are partnering with Ramapo and the DOE, and we're getting lots of teachers up here. Teachers that have never been here before, teachers that don't know what the School of Conservation does or what it can do, and we're excited to get them out in the field and provide opportunities for them to understand how to be better educators when it relates to climate change. And then the third leg of that stool is the student field experience, and that's a lot of what you're all familiar with because that's a strong part of the SOC legacy. And we've always had a multidisciplinary approach. Lauren was talking about teaching climate change through the lens of Spanish and art and music and dance, and it's not just a science-related topic. And so we're really excited. We have 2 new field experiences that are related to climate change education. One of them gets the kids out on campus collecting data with laser thermometers, and when you give kids lasers, all kinds of fun things happen. But they learn about surface temperatures and how they can translate that information back to creating greener spaces that may absorb less heat. And then the other new lesson we have is more focused on the idea of climate resilience and emotional resilience related to climate change. So we actually have the students go out in the forest and create ephemeral art and poetry and use those more artistic means as a way to explore how they feel about climate change and explore some possible solutions. So, we're thinking more holistically. Carrie mentioned, all of our lessons have been correlated. What we do here is so awesome, and it has been for so long that we're already teaching climate change education. We probably have been for close to 75 years, but now we're looking at it through a slightly different lens. And so the long-term goal here is to continue to build opportunities for teachers to learn from the researchers and for the science the folks that are doing the science research on campus to be able to share what they're doing with the students and the teachers, and to continue to build a really holistic program here that supports climate change education across the state and just gets kids here, gets them back out in the woods, gets the teachers back out in the woods, and to keep doing what we've done really well for 75 years, but with a slightly new twist. So thank you.
See what I mean? Rock star. So it's not often that a sister gets to introduce a brother to education panel, but I am very, very excited to welcome my brother Paul Kirk, who is active member of the Chester County chapter for Citizens Climate Lobby. It's a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization focused on local, national, and international policies affecting the global climate crisis. So Paul's role in all of this is to talk about how all of you can now become more engaged in climate discussions. So I'm delighted to have my brother here with me. Paul?
Thanks, Greg. Well, it's certainly humbling to be sitting here among all these panelists, listening to all the amazing things that they accomplish on a daily basis and in their careers for climate change. And if you're like me, you probably ask yourselves, what can I do? Well, I'm happy you asked. You can join Citizens Climate Lobby. As Carrie said, Citizens Climate Lobby is a volunteer, bipartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to effectuate the passage of climate-friendly legislation. It has about 420 national chapters in the United States and about 120 chapters internationally. It is organized by congressional district. Each chapter has a leader, it's volunteer, and they allow you ways in which you can contact your local, state, and national officials on a really easy basis to effectuate passage of climate-positive legislation. The core legislation of CCL is a carbon fee and dividend program. Essentially what this does is it imposes a fee on polluters who, at the point when they extract fossil fuels. The revenue produced from that fee is returned to low-income citizens in the form of a dividend. So there's the fee and the dividend. The studies have indicated that this is probably the most effective means and the most effective legislation to bring down carbon usage in the future. It's based on some very basic principles. First of all, the people that are paying the fee are the people that are doing the polluting. That's equitable. Secondly, it's based on the economic principle of supply and demand. As the price goes up because you're paying the fee, you're incented to look for other ways to do things or non-carbon producing energy. So it's equitable and it's based in sound economics. As I said, CCL is broken into the local districts. There is the main legislation is kind of in a stall period because of the political climate that we're in. But there's still a lot of work that's being done by CCL on other environmental and climate-friendly initiatives. And some of those are local, some of those are state, some of those are national. There's Big Wire Act, there's the Forest Act, there's a myriad of other acts and legislations that allow you to get involved. One of the other things that's really great about it, CCL, is you become aware of all these pieces of legislation that I know I otherwise was not aware of at all. And it's really fascinating and very helpful. So all of us have different abilities and opportunities to get involved and to make a change, some greater than others. But all of us have a voice. And Citizens Climate Lobby is a fantastic tool to use yours. So I encourage you to join and make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. That's great. So signing up, see Paul. actually go to the website, right?
Website,
There
right.
you go. So that concludes our panel presentations, and now the fun stuff starts, and that's an opportunity for you all to ask questions. So, and make this interactive. We really do want to have some engagement for the next little bit. Does anyone have a question? Yes.
My question is actually for Paul. You said about having a fee that disincentivizes pollution. How does that? Is there anything in place that keeps that from being passed along to consumers? So, like, big oil drills a hole and it creates a whole bunch of pollution. The government says, "Hey, well, you got to pay a fee if you're creating this much pollution." Is there anything in place that prevents big oil then from saying, "Well, we'll just raise the price of the oil and then it passes along to the consumer"?
Great question, and obviously the answer is yes. Would that affect the price? Yes, it would, but that's where the dividend comes in to offset that price increase. And the dividend would be paid initially to the lower income consumers and then on an upward scale. And the studies have indicated that up to 95% of any price increase initially would be offset by the dividend. But again, as time goes on, that price increase will affect the polluters or the oil companies, and they would be incentivized to continue that and incentivized to look for other alternative sources, as would the consumer as the price went up. Sure.
Yes. Yeah, hi, my name is Ruchika Tiamin. I'm here from Hackettstown, New Jersey. Today I was granted the F1 visa, which actually got me here in the United States 32 years ago. My question is, I'm very proud to be a U.S. citizen. My question is regarding the population statistics and what the data shows. So I know that 1.4 billion people live in India, 1.4 billion in China. That combined is close to just under half of the world population, with 330 million or so in the U.S. What does the data show? Is our pollution levels coming more so from our developed countries of the world, or is it the underdeveloped, which are now stepping into the developing world? Where is more of the pollution coming from? I'm more curious about the data, and somebody on the panel who can help me with it. Thank you again. Anybody from the panel, it's an open question. Thank you.
Anyone want to take that?
Jump on that one?
Doctor?
So that's a great question, and sadly, when you see the most developed countries are the ones who are emitting the most carbon, and the countries that have the very least use of carbon are the ones who are being affected most. So when we look at places like Bangladesh, for example, where you see these pictures of children floating on doors, and they have a tiny amount of usage compared to the rest of the world here. So it's very disproportionate. I think when we think about countries like China and India, it's more of a gray area, mixed bag. But if you just kind of look at the ranks of who are the biggest polluters and who are the biggest recipients of the damage, it's incredibly disproportionate.
Anyone else want to? Okay. Another question? Yes.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, what are the challenges and how do you overcome them teaching about these subjects in a country where a large portion of the population either doesn't believe these issues exist or they're secondary to a lot of other issues? That's for anyone.
Who'd like to take that?
I can start on that one and then we can. Yeah. So a large part of our challenges around implementing the standards are that we have many teachers who are afraid to teach about this explicitly, right? And we have many districts where administrators are worried about implementation. And to that end, we even have districts that, frankly didn't apply for our grant opportunities because they felt like they couldn't get their board to approve them because the boards were just going to say no to anything that had the words climate change included. To that end, I think we've done ourselves a little bit of a disservice by calling it climate change education. This is not the first time that I'm saying this, so I'm not surprising some of us here. If we had called it sustainability education, if we had called it any number of other things, we would have made our lives significantly easier. I know we wanted to plant the flag in the sand, but I think we've made our lives unnecessarily challenging. And so now part of my role and the CCLC's role will be to help districts, help teachers finesse the language to still be able to teach this really important content without getting stuck in a political quagmire, but it's not easy.
Just following up with that, another way to influence people that are not believers is to speak their language. The carbon fee and dividend program actually economically shows that eventually clean energy is more economically feasible, and there are bigger profit opportunities for clean energy than there are for fossil fuel energy. So if you can demonstrate that there is an economic incentive to make the change, then you're going to convince some of the people who may be on the fossil fuel side to jump over. The reason why they're jumping over initially, who cares? Just let them jump. Come on over. Let's get it clean. You may be coming over to make money. Great. And not for altruistic reasons, but get them over. So that's another way.
I'll just briefly add as well, educator perspective also. I think a little bit of optimism. I think the conversation around this has changed, though, somewhat, right? This is not where it was even just a few years ago. I think people are much more open to it, even those you hear who push back. It's that, yes, climate change is real, but it's not man caused, or we have limited influence. It's changed somewhat, right? And I think that as we move it over, that will continue to happen, and I think that's in part, by the way, due to the education that has been happening over the years. I will say, though, it is real, and probably also because there are other issues pushing to the forefront, but it is real when educators are worried about what they can teach or what they can go in there and do. I think we see that in our board meetings right now. Things have become much more acrimonious. People are there attacking board members. They're calling out educators by name around issues, and these are educators who are saying, wait a minute, the state has told us what we've got to do. The district has created what we've got to teach. I'm doing that job, and here you are yelling at me because I'm talking about this issue, right? Whatever that may be. So it's something we definitely have to keep looking at. But I do think on this issue specifically, I certainly have seen a change over the years in terms of how much people are willing to accept that this is real and something we should talk about.
Any other thoughts on that?
So I have two quick comments. So one, we should sort of know the biggest producer of onshore wind in the U.S. is the state of Texas. Okay? That's when we think big oil in places where you're not allowed to say climate change and things like that. They know they're going to run out of oil, and they're not going to be poor, right? So when we think about it, there are lots of places, and I'm sure they're talking about novel innovation and green energy and things like that rather than using the word climate change. But like Sarah said earlier, we have to be really careful that the language that we use meets the audience that we're working with. Like, but first rule of teaching, right? Meet your students where they're at. That's how we have to be with all humans, I think. And the second thing is we need to be nice. So I did a series of workshops with teachers in Ocean County right after lockdown, and everybody was outside and masked, but it was in person. They weren't PD. It wasn't PD on Zoom. It was PD in person. And we had one teacher at the end of the workshop say to us, I have to say, I was a total climate change denier before these workshops. And I should say, we assumed anyone who's choosing to come for 4 hours after school 3 weeks in a row, they would obviously be on board with learning about climate change. She came because it was in person, because she couldn't do one more Zoom workshop, and she needed her PD hours for school. And she said, we gave her dinner, we were nice to her, and we didn't fight with her. And because we came with factual information and we supported our claims with evidence, the way good science teachers do, and we came from a kind approach, she was completely convinced, and she's told everybody she knows that climate change is real. All right? So, don't get me wrong. I want to argue with the deniers too. I think it's crazy, but if you don't even know, if you assume that they are believing the evidence, and you come to them from a place of kindness and sharing, it sometimes changes people's minds.
I actually just want to add something. In my capacity as a social scientist and working with the DEP, one of the things that I would talk to my colleagues about all the time is meeting people where they are, and identifying ways to zone in on the things that they care about. And communities care whether or not their residents are flooded out during rainstorms. They care about whether their roadways are open and accessible for emergency, vehicles and just to get to work. They care about their properties. They care about the health of their people. And so these were things that I would often tell my colleagues, use that language, talk about the things that they care about, because they are all related to climate change. They're all related to the initiatives that we're trying to address, but use the language that that sparks an interest that they can associate with. So.
I have a quick comment. As the experiential educator, one of the experiential educators in the room, I think one of the most important things is exposure. Getting kids outdoors, getting them to care. Forget the language, forget the science education just for a second, although I do think we need a much stronger science education program. I think if we don't give the kids the opportunity to make the connections to the natural world, then they're not going to care if they need to save it or not.
My name is Peter Del Vecchio. I was a counselor here in 1972. Learned about nature through the Boy Scouts. And so I'm interested in whether or not there are any global connections between, like we have one little tiny organization here, and you have relatively tiny organizations. So around the globe, we have little tiny organizations. Are there any global organizations that tie together all the little tiny organizations, much like we have the United Nations and other global concepts where we do the work on the ground, but what exists, if anything, about a global network is what I'm really talking about. A global network that rises above the helter-skelter and reaches out and helps each other, much like a web, I guess, a worldwide web of nature preservers and protectors. Does anything like that exist? The second thing I would like to say, I've also been a lifelong educator. I've been a band director and a chorus teacher. And just like we have in the world of music, these organizations and symphony orchestras and schools and clubs and associations that children belong to, and then their parents come to the concerts. One of the ways we may be able to reach, I guess it's more of a statement and question, but is it possible that within all these educational institutions that you service and you function with, are there clubs that children can join and belong to? And are there national
formal organizations? There isn't necessarily one formal global organization, but NAAE is then interacting with its affiliate in the UK, for example. So this is a thing that we need, right? So you point out that it's a thing that we need. But unfortunately, as we all know, we don't have great funding for this kind of work. And so it is incredibly challenging for us to work globally. It's easier now, post-COVID, where we have much more infrastructure for us to meet online and be able to connect via email and so on. But as we all know, that also doesn't lead to the greatest kind of connection. This meeting together face-to-face is what leads to those kinds of really great connections. So there's a need to be able to determine funding to pull groups of people together globally. And I would say one example of that is the Earthshot Prize. So I don't know if you all are familiar with that, but that's Prince William. So Prince William's project is that he's created this international prize that gives £1 million to 5 organizations across the world who are engaging in creating a climate-related solution that's in 5 different categories. There are 5 different categories. There's one winner in each category. But the top 15 finalists are convened in a global meeting once a year. And then they work in technical assistance for that whole next year. That kind of opportunity that specifically is engaging environmental education specifically around the globe, I think would be really, really powerful and fantastic. So all we need is a funder. Who do we know who has, $50 million they want to give away?
Just to follow up, what about the United Nations? They do a lot of internal work.
They do.
Is there anything through the United Nations that would be more global and organized?
They do, and so there is the Sustainable Development Group at the United Nations. They're less focused on us, though, and they're more focused on the nations in the world that are more impacted by the things that we're doing.
Pete, one of the issues with the international impact is that none of these organizations, UN included, would have any real teeth to enforce. The only way that I'm aware that enforcement can take place is through, again, legislative actions that would have an effect on international trade through tariffs and things like that, that would impose higher tariffs on those countries that are destroying rainforests, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a lot of pending legislation to that effect. But is there an organization? I don't believe there's an organization that does or could have the clout or the teeth to have any enforcement. So I think it has to come from a legislative place that is based in economic teeth. So, sure.
Clubs, just real quickly, yes, there are green teams that are being created. Sustainable Jersey leads that effort. And so in addition to Boys and Girl Scouts, one of the things that our grant program is hoping to be able to promote are more green teams. So student-centered green teams at each school, as well as district-level green teams that are composed of adults to be able to move action.
Okay, Doug, we're going to probably close with you, and then I have a question for the panel, and then we have to move on to our awards so that we can keep on schedule. So, Doug.
Thank you so much, Carrie. And I just wanted to thank every one of the panelists for what you've talked about. It really is a revelation to kind of learn about climate change education right now in New Jersey. And then obviously, Tanya, you are the kind of best example of experiential education mattering and working and having that experience in 6th grade. How do you feel right now? Obviously, we want to get every student in New Jersey to come to the School of Conservation. We know that's not going to happen, and that's why the climate change education curriculum is just so groundbreaking. My thing, and I'm just kind of reflecting a little bit on what Dr. Madden and Sean said, there are now rain days. There's also not really that many snow days anymore, and it's heat days now. So when we kind of think about climate change, right, one of the other things, and Sean, you referenced this, the work through Healthy Schools Now, through the Work Environment Council, there is a real crisis on being able to teach kids, especially in urban districts, in classrooms that are not teachable, right? If you're trying to teach an 85-degree classroom, that does not work. And so I guess my curiosity, and it is kind of so obviously alarming to kind of hear about political polarization, which we know kind of impacting what teachers are thinking about. But Dr. Madden, you're talking about the program and working with teachers. I'm curious, on all the levels, all the counties, I'm curious how students are responding to the curriculum right now. And then I'd love to hear more from you too, Sarah, on just how to scale this. So $4.5 million, obviously, in the abstract is a lot of money, not a lot of money to kind of do this overall. So how do we kind of scale this and kind of learn from not only what teachers are telling us, but what students are telling us?
So from speaking sort of anecdotally from what me and my grad students have been able to collect data on, generally speaking, kids like talking about what affects them. It's really, and especially when solutions are part of the conversation and student action and advocacy is part of the conversation, kids get really involved. I'll never forget being in 7th grade and getting a question about, imagine you were going to build a triangular pool. If you give kids things that don't make a lot of sense, they're not going to be engaged. If you talk to kids about things that affect their lives, they are automatically engaged. And also, they know when we're lying. So, kids are great at that. So if someone says something about climate change, and the adult in the room is, when you get older, that's something you can talk about. They never want that answer, right? And I think when you take kids seriously and you let them know that we're going to talk about this thing that affects you, and it's going to affect you in the future, and your generation's going to have to fix this because we messed up. I think it really puts them in a sense of agency, and it gets them engaged. So
of the observations that I personally did and the ones that I've seen the notes from my grad students, the kids are generally very engaged with this kind of work.
The kids are all right.
Yes, the kids are all right. The kids are going to see what's
In terms of scaling, the thing that I think is really interesting is that a lot of what we know works doesn't necessarily cost us money, but it requires systems change. When we came out of COVID, I was still in schools during COVID. And as we reopened, I was really hopeful that we were going to rethink a whole bunch of things. And we didn't. We went right back to doing what we had been doing before. And it was very frustrating. And I think that we did that because that made adults feel comfortable. And it was easier than rethinking things. But if we were willing to rethink what a school day and school week looks like, we would have a whole lot more opportunity. Because I'm going to say my crazy thing out loud. If we thought about a school day lasting from 8 o'clock until 5 o'clock, and we thought about our school staff as not having to work a 5-day week, but maybe a 4-day week or maybe a 3-day week, and maybe not everybody's working all on the same days. If we were willing to think about those kinds of changes in scheduling, it would unlock for us all kinds of opportunities in terms of the ways that classes could be longer and allow for more experiential learning to take place right during a class period, more time for teachers to engage in professional development, meaningful professional development and co-planning, et cetera, right? It would alleviate some burnout. It would provide parents with care for their kids that lasts longer so that they're not scrambling to figure out how to pick their kids up after school. There are all kinds of things that wouldn't cost us money necessarily, but it would cost us time and effort to change, right? So I think the more that we think about how are we willing to be innovative in the way that we are going to address what we know just doesn't work, right? We know based upon our issues with retaining teachers, with attracting new staff, with chronic absenteeism of kids and of teachers, that way that we're structuring school isn't working for most of us, kids or adults. So why can't we think about doing something differently that would mean that we wouldn't have to throw $5 million at this every single year in order for it to be viable? It would mean that we could transform what learning looks like for everybody, create more interdisciplinary learning spaces, more co-planning and collaboration, and then, we would solve some of these problems. That's my wild pie in the sky idea.
We're gonna stop it right there. We don't want to get too crazy. That's a great idea. But we're running out of time, and so I'm going to have to ask you if you have questions for the panelists, bring them up. They'll be here for the reception. I'm sure they'll love to have more engaged conversation over a cocktail and some hors d'oeuvres. But at this time, before we go over to the reception, we're going to do some awards. I wanted to give the panelists an opportunity to do a concluding statement, but again, I think that we're just going to pause it here and they can share their thoughts with you. But I would very much like to thank each one of you for all the information you shared with us today. It's really, thank you so much. And so we're going to move into the awards portion. So your panelists, you are welcome to join the audience while we do this. And except for Tanya, she has to stay here. All right, so we're going to start with the Changemaker Award. We're really excited at the School of Conservation to be able to recognize some individuals today who have been a part of the school in a variety of ways over the years. And we're going to start with the Changemaker Award. And just a little bit about this. When Tanya and I were discussing a group of people we should recognize and thank for all that you've done for us and supported us and participated in our programs, who else but the school coordinators who bring their students here year after year, really since 1950, school coordinators have worked with us. So we're delighted to be able to honor you educators today. Tanya and I and many of you are perfect examples of how programs like we have here at the School of Conservation experience can shape a young person's life. We've both pursued careers in the environmental field, and I know Dennis Toff was also a student here and is one of our premier environmental lawyers. And so we wanted to thank each of the educators who have helped and been advocates in their school systems for the young people, because they know that coming here can change the lives of young people and open doors and windows in their young minds so that they can see and learn to value all that nature and the environment offers to them, so that they can find their place in this beautiful world in which we live. And so I'm going to turn it over to Tanya, who is going to take a moment and speak about each one of our awardees, and I'm going to help her give out the award.
This is so fun. And, Carrie mentioned that when we had our brief pause, when the school was not having school groups on site, it broke my heart because my foundational experience as an environmentalist happened here, and I was working here when the school closed, and I saw what a powerful experience it is for teachers. So I've had the opportunity to see what this experience can do for children and teachers, both as a student and a teacher and as a researcher. And so it was heartbreaking, but now being here as we are reinventing the school and welcoming all these teachers back, it's really the greatest job on earth, sorry. It's not even Disney, it's way better than that. So just a couple things. If you have been on a school field trip, or if you're someone who has been on the back end of organizing, it is so much work. And we've done everything we can to make it as easy as possible for folks to coordinate these trips, but busing and health forms and student allergies and schedules and meetings with parents and buying s'mores for the campfire. All those things take so much time. Not all of the teachers that do this work are recognized for it. Within their districts, not all of them are recognized by their colleagues and their students, but we all appreciate them so very much. And I make sure to point that out every time we have a school group on site. Make sure to thank the teacher that put all the work into putting these trips together, because most people don't realize how much work it is behind the scene. And it is transformative. And these, as Carrie said, these teachers recognize that these experiences are truly transformative for their students. So these folks that we're recognizing today are folks that brought their students here for overnight field trips for decades, and these are the first 5 schools that came back to us when the school reopened. And so we felt like they deserve to be given a little special extra award and a little recognition, because they're taking a chance on us, right? Like, nobody really knows what the School of Conservation is going to be like when the doors reopen, and are we going to have food service back up to where it was before, or even better? What's the overnight accommodation going to be like? Are the pipes going to be working? The toilets flush? And those are all questions we thought a lot about, and have been working really hard to get back up and running. So we just wanted to really thank the folks that we consider to be our rock star coordinators and acknowledge them. So Rhiannon and Becky from Stevens Co-op are the first 2 teachers that we're going to call up today. Stevens they have 2 campuses in Jersey City and in Hoboken. They are also coincidentally celebrating their 75th anniversary this year. So it's very fun to be able to celebrate this milestone with them. They have been bringing their 5th graders to the School of Conservation for over 20 years as their start of the year bonding trip. Rhiannon started to reach out to us probably before any of the other teachers did, like, are the doors open yet? Can we start bringing the kids back? And, I kept saying, we're working on it, be patient with us. But they were so eager to get their students back up here. They also have a distinguished honor of being our first overnight group back since the doors reopened. And one of the reasons that they were able to do that was that Becky was extremely helpful in getting the Stevens team to understand the strength of the program and the effect it had. She's an 8th grade teacher now. She was a 5th grade teacher when she came here with the Stevens students, but her advocacy work within the district itself really enabled them to get their kids back up here. And just as a special aside, there's some fundraising materials hanging up that with really cute pictures of kids smiling with luggage, and it's one of my favorite pictures that we've taken since we reopened, and that's the Stevens kids. They got off the bus and they had those big heavy bags, and they were trying to drag them in front of Longhouse to get over to Lenape, and I was like, through the tears, I was able to take that picture. So thank you so much to the two of you. Come on up, we'll give you your
so much. It is an honour to accept this award. When I got the call, I was like, oh, I do the back-end organisation. I'm the administrator. I cannot accept this award without Becky.
Thank you so much. I also want to comment, we only came from Hudson County, not the UK, with our Scottish and British accents this morning. But yeah, I just also wanted to share like an anecdote. When, as we're now calling it, the pause happened, I was still the 5th grade teacher, and it was my students who wanted to write letters to say that this was such a wonderful experience they all had. And one of the conversations we had was so important in terms of like what we've heard today from the panel. They were debating whether to write it handwritten or send an email, because they saw the environmental impact that using letters would have, because, it was wasteful. But at the same time, they realized that adults probably would have valued a letter more than an email. So I think it really does speak to like the cross-curricular impact of educational and environmental education, and it's just so wonderful that our students can now come back to Stokes and experience the wonderful that is the Rainbow Bridge and, being a cruiser here, which is wonderful. Thank you so much.
All right. So the next coordinator that we'd like to recognize is Casey Bree. Casey is a middle school science teacher in Garwood. Garwood has been bringing their 7th graders here for a very long time. We don't know the exact first year that Garwood has that they came, but we do have a little bit of evidence because one of the props that we still use for our table numbers was created by Garwood and in 1978. There's a date on the bottom. So when you hear from Casey, you are going to understand the positive and energy and the passion that she brings to her work. A lot of emails that we get from Casey are in all caps. And Allison and I were talking about like some of the things that we could say about the coordinators, and one of our favorite things with Casey is actually kind of a new thing that just happened on their last trip when they came back on site. The lake, which looks beautiful right now, didn't look like this a month ago. We had this algae bloom, and Garwood was about to come, and I said, I think we need to give them a little heads up. The kids could like walk across the lake instead of boating. And so we took a picture and we sent it to Casey, and we said, maybe you want to change the activities that you're running with the kids. And she was like, oh no, this is a perfect opportunity to talk about eutrophication. We just finished doing this in class. And so that's the kind of teacher that she is, and that's one of the reasons why it's such a joy to work with her. I also wanted to mention, Sarah talked about that 2023 grant money that the state released, and one of the things that schools could do with that money was to take a field trip. And so it was a great opportunity because we had the field-based lessons in place. The Garwood trip last year, the busing was covered by the state grant that Casey applied for and got. So, and we would also be remiss if we didn't acknowledge Casey's wonderful administrator, Mary Emmons, who has been working with Casey to support this trip for many, 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 many years. She's here in the front row. If there were other principals in the room, I would still say this. You're one of my favorite principals. So, Casey, come on.
Well, I did notice in the email you said I had to make it brief. And if you know anything about me, nothing about me is brief. Sorry, yeah. Yes, I am very fortunate to be here. I am very fortunate to be a teacher, and I owe so much of my love for this place to my administrator, Mary Emmons, and to my family. So it was 13 years ago that my first child came here as a student, and that's all we ever heard about since. My son later on, which is the reason why I became a teacher, came here, and the kid who could not stand the outdoors, I now can't keep him away from fishing lakes. It's a big problem. But the impact of this place is resounding, and it had an incredible impact on me as a teacher. And just a quick anecdote, last night we had the semi-formal for our 8th grade graduating class. Our school district only goes up to 8th grade. We do send away to high school. So 8th grade is a big deal. We're a teeny, 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 tiny town. The entire 8th grade class has 34 students. And so during their semi-formal, they get introduced and they write out their own little cards about their favorite memory from Lincoln School. Now that's kindergarten through 8th grade. They've spent 9 years. They've gone through 9 field trips. They have tons of stories about each other. And last night, as Mrs. Emmons was reading off each child and doing their introductions, we said, oh my gosh, their favorite Lincoln School memory, 2/3 of the students, was coming to Stokes. So many of our panelists said that small impact on a child, where it goes in the future. Well, the person who carved these still talks about it. They still live in Garwood. The sign, the wooden sign that says, "Welcome to the School of Conservation," was carved over 40 years ago by a Garwood student. Well, he's now an old man. Sorry. The point is that what happens here does have a resounding effect. And I could not thank Tanya enough. She has made it so easy to bring my kids. So I just thank Stokes. Instead of you thanking me, I want to thank you guys.
Okay, so our third honoree today is Devin Callan. Devin is a health and phys ed teacher at the Jordan Road School in Summers Point. They have been coming to the SOC with their 6th graders for over 40 years. We just did the math last time they were here. And Devin has coordinated the trip for about half of that time. So she's definitely knows our place very well. This trip is such a strong part of the school culture at Summers Point that when we were not able to do overnights, we were only doing day trips, they made the 3-hour one-way trip by bus so the kids could come just for a day trip. And they are continuing to do that because Devin is so deeply committed to making sure that every student in their school gets to experience this trip. It's a real rite of passage at Summers Point. So they're still doing day trips, even though... One left, yeah. And Devin is one of the most organized people I know, so she's a pleasure to coordinate with. They also have a new principal this year who didn't really understand the impact of this trip, and he was open-minded enough to come on the overnight with the students, right? And, I was schmoozing a lot because I wanted to make sure that he had an especially good experience. And he could not stop gushing about what he saw happening with students that he saw in the school every day and different things that he was seeing through the kids' eyes. And he just was very, very happy by the end. One of the things that's my favorite thing about when Devin comes with her students, every coordinator is a little bit different. Devin really values the health and wellness aspect of this trip. And so really her focus is getting the kids excited about the hike to Sunrise. And this year I had a couple kids who were like, I'm not sure, I'm a little nervous about being out on the trails as long as we're going to be. And I said, no, it's a once in a lifetime experience. Most people don't get to do a hike like this. And they went and they made it back after dinner time. I think it was already like a little bit dark. And one of the kids was like, Tanya, I don't know. And I said, how many people can say they hiked 12 miles in their lifetime, right? So what a gift Devin is giving these kids, this experience to do something that most of them would never have the opportunity to do. So, Devin, come on up.
I just couldn't speak off the cuff, so I wrote it down. But I timed it. It's only a minute and a half, so we're good. Obviously, I'm so honored. But really, the true champions here should be all of them because, they worked so hard to bring this campus back to life, and it's only because of them that we're able to have and be here today. So on May 22nd, I had the privilege of bringing my 25th group of students to this beautiful campus, and that group was also the 40th group of students to come from the Summers Point School District. We started in 1980, and due to some brief pauses, it ended up taking a little bit longer, but we're all here now. So we are so blessed to have a school district that does support and value this amazing experience. We're in a little bit of a different situation. We're fairly far away, very South Jersey. A large percentage of our students come from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. The city of Summers Point actually borders the 9th Street Bridge into Ocean City. One side of our entire town borders the bay, yet many of my students have never seen the water. Outdoor and environmental education obviously is particularly significant for students like ours. Engaging with nature, they don't get outside. It has such a positive cognitive effect on their cognitive abilities, attention, their academic performance. We see it, as many people said, when they were here, they just flourish in this environment. Social and emotional development, we see so many positive things. Environmental stewardship, access to new opportunities, equalizes the education for our students, which is so hard when we're in the classroom. In addition, this trip to Stokes, as we call it in Summers Point, is a tradition. And traditions help to preserve values, social cohesion, belonging, especially in Summers Point. It allows for intergenerational connections because so many of our students have both their parents and their grandparents at this point who have attended. We even have a Facebook page that is just devoted to students who have gone to Stokes. So it's so important to our students and obviously to myself as well. I had never had the opportunity to attend as a child. So I was doing a workout yesterday and a Whitney Houston remake came on and I thought of today's celebration and my last 25 trips to this campus. Whitney sang, "My love is your love and your love is my love." I won't really sing it for you, but that's it. The friends of the New Jersey School of Conservation and everyone in this room feel the love, and that's why we're here, and I'm so honored.
Okay, and the last person that we're honoring today is Bob Locantor. He's a health and PE teacher from the Winona School. Winona has been coming since 1997, and Bob has been coordinating their trip for 26 years. Oh. Bob's not the last person. I skipped Beth. We'll go back to Beth in a second. Sorry. I can't see through my tears up here. I missed my notes. Okay. It's fitting that Winona was the very first school back on site for a day trip because that was on November 12th of 2021, because Bob is one of our most passionate champions. They also made the 3-hour one-way bus trip in the rain to get back to us, and that day Tom Card and I were honored to be the instructors for their group. Bob comes from an era when teachers would do a lot of the facilitation of the school field experiences here, and Bob holds on to that for dear life. He loves teaching beaver ecology. It's his favorite thing. And one of our SOC miracles is that the beaver colony had disappeared from, reasonable hiking distance here at the School of Conservation until we reopened. Now the beavers are back at Steam Mill, and Bob had a place to take the kids so that they could see active beaver activity. So just another SOC miracle. Last year, when Bob thought it was his last School of Conservation trip, he thought he was retiring, he presented us with his hiking stick. And I'm going to let Bob tell you about this hiking stick, but it symbolizes his journey with us at the School of Conservation for the last 26 years. I am going to loan it to him so that he can talk about it today and bring it back for one last trip because he's decided to postpone his retirement for 1 year. So Bob, come on.
You sure you want to give me the mic? Okay. First of all, congratulations to all the recipients for their efforts, because it takes so much work for a good cause. And there's a lot of labor involved, but when it's a labor of love, it's not that much of a problem, really. Just like the panels that's here and the people who are sitting, we're here for a good cause, no doubt about it. And we support a good cause all the time when we're passionate about it. So I don't mind bringing our kids 150 miles one way to come up here every year, and it's a joy. And my superintendent, a quick little story, 27 years ago, he told me, Bob, we're going on a camping trip, and for 2 nights and 3 days, and the kids are going to have a great time and learn about the environment, how to improve the environment, all that stuff. I said, great, sir, so when are you going? And he said, I ain't going. And I was the only full-time male teacher at my school at the time. So it was a blessing in disguise, because I grew up in the city of Camden, and that was my jungle and forest that I roamed. But this was different for me, and it was great. And I fell in love with the environment, and I fell in love with just going outdoors. And I took beaver ecology because it was the farthest hike. And I trained my kids, the mile runs, since we're phys ed teachers. Great. My kids, we always train in September and October. And we bring the kids down late October, November. So they're ready to hike. And I tell them it's a joy. And it's amazing the stories that come about. Kids' anticipation and anxieties. And some of them, when they get done, they're like, I didn't know this was so great. And they tell their parents and their parents, I have lists of chaperones who want to come on this trip. 1 year I've taken 12 chaperones, and I had a list of 27. So they believe it. My community believes in it, which is good. They support my program. Unfortunately, with COVID, things are being hit pretty hard. And just for the bus ride alone to come up here is $4,500. So I do fundraising. I'll do after-school programs and summer camp programs just to cut down the cost so we can keep this alive, keep it going. There's no other planet we can live on right now that we know of. So we do the best we can to keep things going. And I want to thank everyone who's here today, because it's a good cause. I'm touched to see so many people passionate about keeping this thing going, keeping the environment going. So thank you to all of you. And Tanya, thank you. And Carrie, thank you. I appreciate it. And it's wonderful. And let's just keep it. Let's ride this wave and make it go. And I know we've been hit hard by legislation and we lost some money, but the real heroes are the people here, because when this was canceled through COVID and the Montclair State University backed out, they rolled up their sleeves. They contacted the legislators, and they contacted everyone. They contacted me. I said, let's do it. Let's do it. And these people are the heroes behind who kept pushing. Yes, they are. They are. And the people here, thank you so much. So I want to say thank you again. It's an honor. Thank you so much. And let's keep it going. Quick story. With the stick, I started, 1997, and I have a little beaver in it that I put on there, and it's become a talk, because I walk with it all the time, the kids, and I marked all the dates, and I have, one was 2020, that was COVID, I have an X on it in red, and then 21-22 was when we first started coming back. We were one of the first schools to do a one-day trip, and so that was done. Unfortunately, may I tell the story that we left here, or we usually leave at lunchtime, so it's no problem. Well, we left around 6 o'clock, and 6 o'clock around here with a bus, made the wrong turn. So I had to get out of the bus and help back up a bus on a one-way street somewhere around. We finally made it, but yeah, but that's okay. And like I said, it's just well worth it. And thank all of you who are supporting a worthy cause. And hopefully things are not cut, and we keep pushing to keep it going. Thank you so much. Take care. Have a great evening.
Okay, Beth, now you get to come up here. So Beth Hansen is a science teacher at Stonebridge Middle School in Allentown. This one is very near and dear to my heart because that's my alma mater. I came here with Stonebridge in, I guess I'll tell you the year because we're all friends. I was here in 1986, and I was a 7th grader at the time, and I actually reached out to my old vice principal to confirm. I wasn't sure if we were the first class or the second class to come with Stonebridge. We were the second. But they've been coming here for a very long time, and obviously this trip is an important part of their school culture. Beth could not have been more supportive during the SOC pause. And that support and our reopening has translated into student engagement. She has organized letter writing campaigns and talk about like multidisciplinary, cross-disciplinary. You know, Beth isn't just teaching science, she's teaching civics. She is a dedicated professional, a lifelong learner. She comes to our teacher professional development workshops. She does all kinds of wonderful things in her classroom that she learns here, and she really translates what the kids learned here back into what they're doing in the classroom. She has stayed on campus with her loved ones without the kids, which is also a really fun way to improve her connection here. And they've been here during volunteer days. I mean, we see her all the time, and she's just one of the most wonderful people. And I just feel so privileged that she is one of our honorees this year, and that I get to talk about my old alma mater and the wonderful work that's still happening there. So, Beth.
I'm going to just say a few words. I've been listening to everybody talk today, and you kept saying what I was going to say. All the wonderful things that are done here, how important the education is, all of that. So as I'm hearing all the stories, I have 2 little stories that I want to share. Through all the years that we did come to Stokes, there were a couple of years that we had to go to a different location for our trip. One was, there was a nor'easter. We were not allowed to leave Allentown the first night. That was when I was working with Lisa. We replanned the entire trip to come like the next day, and the School of Conservation was closed. So we were able to leave the next day, but we couldn't come here. So we had to pivot. You know, the kids had paid their money, and we had to find another location. We went to another location, which shall remain nameless. And then during the pause as well, we went to another location. And I can tell you, the education that's being done here cannot be touched. I've sent my own children here. I brought my students here. I've done a lot of PD myself here and other places. And what's happening here at the School of Conservation, head and shoulders above anything you can find anywhere. So kudos to you guys on that. The one little student story that kind of came to mind while I was listening to you folks was that when we plan this trip, it's a lot of work. Starts in the fall, and we send home letters, and we do the fundraising and all those kind of things. And as seventh graders, the most important question, and they've heard about it for years, they know it's coming, can we bring our cell phones? And the answer is no. And my vice principal, who's been coming for many years, he's like, you're still sticking with that? I'm like, we are still sticking with that as long as we can and throughout all the little meetings that we have. But what about our Snapchat streaks? And what about our, and then they come and they're like, oh, I have to be in touch with my parents. 2 years ago, we had somebody who couldn't sleep without the sound machine. And so it was, I need it so I can sleep. And I'm like, we'll figure it out, So we don't bring the phones. And every year, no matter what, I have the couple kids who you'd never think it would be those kids. And they come and they say, you were right. It was a different experience being off the screen, realizing how much fun we can have outside. They say they feel pressure to respond in a certain amount of time. So if you're out hiking and you've got your cell phone, I got to check it. That was gone. And for that reason, it was just another layer of experience that these kids are getting. So that was just a little aside. And then the one last thing that I do want to end with. I know, right? That's right. I'm old, I can't remember. So we were camping over at Stokes last night, and I was just talking about the program here and, what we were coming here to do, and Thoreau came up. And my daughter Carly was talking about, the quote, when Thoreau said, I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach. And what I want to say is that Thoreau went to the woods to live deliberately, and through the work that's still being done in these woods, we carry on and continue to teach. And we must remember not to be careless, but continue to be deliberate in the stewardship of these lands and the education of the young people who will carry those traditions and that stewardship forward.
Okay, we have one more award that we are going to give out right now, and then we will move to our reception. This is a unique award. We've never recognized a service organization before, and I just want to take a moment. I'll try to do this quickly because I know snacks and lunch are between me and the award. The organization is called the New Jersey Youth Corps of Phillipsburg. And I first met their leader, Mike Muckle, when I was involved in the Pohatcong Creek Watershed Association. By that point, the Youth Corps was already famous in Warren County for their service work, especially as it related to community service and natural resources. The New Jersey Youth Corps is designed to assist young people who have left high school prior to completion with the skills needed to obtain a diploma and prepare for employment. Since 1998, New Jersey Youth Corps of Phillipsburg has offered academic instruction, work experience, and personal and career counseling to young people who have been underserved by providing an equitable program of education and job training to thousands of young people and many thousands of hours of community service in Warren County. 3 years ago, Michael and I met again because there had been a period of time where we hadn't seen each other for a long time, right, Mike? And He was attending a class. Actually, he was sitting outside of a class that his wife was attending on native plant. And I'm not exactly sure how it happened, but we both looked at each other and realized, oh my God, it's you. And hugged each other, and we're just thrilled because for some reason both of us had been thinking about the other and how we might come together and form a partnership, because the Youth Corps' mission is one of service, and the School of Conservation was built by the Civilian Conservation Corps, a jobs program and community service program, and it was a natural fit. So since then, they've participated in campus cleanups. They've worked to develop a program that we hope one day will lead to a certificate in green energy audits. They've attended and participated in the 90th anniversary celebration we had here of the Civilian Conservation Corps. Like I said, a group that's mission is aligned with theirs. And they've assisted in the first ever Martin Luther King Day of Service here at the School of Conservation that was organized by our board member, Tanisha Malcolm Witt. So it seemed very fitting that we should create a community service award for our friends at the New Jersey Youth Corps. They are currently working on restoring one of our outdoor classrooms, a very special place for reflection and instruction called Vesper Glen. And if those of you who have good knees and ankles, if you want to head up behind cabin 2, you can see the beautiful, it's almost like a natural amphitheater right along Springbrook, and it's magnificent. And they're putting it back together for us, and I can't wait to see when it's done and we can start using that space for some of our programming, right? So at this time, I would like to invite the members of the New Jersey Youth Corps from Phillipsburg to come up to receive your award.
I will be brief, and I know I've said that before, but I don't want to be the guy that heckled the person about the cell phone to be the last person to speak, so I have to acknowledge that. Meeting Kerry that fateful day, I actually came up to a seed propagation workshop that my wife and daughter, that Tanya, you were facilitating. Where did she go? I'm sorry. And it was such a beautiful day. I sat outside reading a book, and then Kerry came over and interrupted that little moment of peace, but it led to a wonderful conversation about a shared energy and passion for the work that we do. This place kind of defies the laws of conservation of matter and energy. You always take more with you than you bring to it, especially around, you want to talk about a science lesson, there you go. Working with my staff, Jonathan, and our Climate Corps members, Aiden and Phil, a small portion of the group of youth that we work with every single year, it's hard to face the insidious effects of climate change and feel really overwhelmed by that. But when you're in a group of people and you're working with a group of people, you have to really kind of focus on what you can do in your immediate sphere of influence. Focus on that small area of around you, because when you're around other groups of people doing the same thing, the effect magnifies. The future belongs, I believe, to people who are willing to get their hands dirty, and these guys do that every single day. Service and Conservation Corps serve in every community across this country, and we hope with the advancement of the American Climate Corps that we can really start to make national service, short of being compulsory, something desirable that young adults want to engage in. It needs to be in every community, equitably. It needs to be inclusive, and if you want to really affect change, go into those communities where you want to work and find out what their needs are first. This has been a real honor, and I'm not going to talk any longer because we're hungry as well. So, Kerry, thank you so much.
So that concludes our morning program. And so what I'm asking you to do now is please exit. And the reception is over at Deer Lodge. If you see the white tent, the food and beverages are there for you. And please enjoy. And then we'll bring you back here for lunch.
I do.